Welcome to episode 263 of Shane Plays Geek Talk. Thanks so much for pressing play. Today I'm joined by Skeeter Green. We're going to be talking about RPGs, his small RPG publisher, Skeeter Green Productions, also the Independent Publishers Union of small RPG publishers, of which he is a part, and his new Kickstarter project, which is the epic finale to The Valley Out of Time, which is a series of zine-sized RPG adventures borrowing heavily from classic dinosaur art books and movies. Think Frazetta and Harryhausen. We also get into things like tips and advice for small RPG publishers from Skeeter's seminar series with Zach Glazar, the chances of making a living working in the RPG industry full-time, also defining success, RPG authors versus developers versus editors versus designers, little industry insight there, the correct way to pronounce bulette, or is it bulette, according to Tim Kask. Find out in the podcast. The secret origin of the name Skeeter, favorite sitcoms of the past, Rob Zombie's movies, NASA probing asteroids, and much, much more on this episode. Folks, also don't forget about our previous episode, 262, with Reapers. That's Reaper Minis. Reaper's Dungeon Dwellers RPG, where I was joined by Joseph Wolf. That was a fantastic discussion, so check that one out. With no further ado, away we go.
Shall we play a game?
Why, yes. I believe we shall.
Oh, I got a live one here.
Getting geeky all up in your podcasts. It's Shane Plays Geek Talk, a journey into the things we love. I'm your host, Shane Stacks. Thanks so much for pressing play. Today I'm joined by Skeeter Green of Skeeter.
Hello, everybody.
It's Skeeter right there of Skeeter Green Productions. And we're going to be talking about all kinds of stuff, including role-playing games, his role-playing game studio, Skeeter Green Productions. Hopefully some weird tangents. We had some pretty good weird tangents before we started recording. And then also I may be able to, Skeeter along with Zach Glazar, they do a recurring small publisher seminar thing at cons. So hopefully in the future I can get Zach on with Skeeter and we'll do like a full-on thing with that. But maybe as a teaser before the podcast is done, I can get some advice and tidbits out of him that come up the most often in these seminars. But anyway, Skeeter, welcome to Shane Plays Geek Talk. So glad to have you. You were on because, one, you're a cool dude. But two, I was at the Small Publishers Seminar at North Texas RPG Con, and you looked directly at me and said, I would like to be on your podcast. And folks, believe it or not, asking people to be on their podcast is not a bad thing. Ask nicely, I was like, sure. So, always happy to have a fun guest, and RPGs are right in the wheelhouse of this podcast. That's not all I do, but I cover RPGs a lot. So glad to have Skeeter. And I love to talk to people who are in business for themselves in the RPG industry, and help learn about what they're doing, help them expose their work. And like I said, maybe give tips and stuff like that. So Skeeter, first I got to ask you, because I don't think I've asked you this before, is Skeeter a nickname? How did you come to be referred to as the state bird of Arkansas? And I can say that because I live in Arkansas.
Actually, my dad is from Tennessee.
Yeah.
So Skeeter is not as outrageous back there in the hills that it is out here. It doesn't cause you to catch a beat down like daily when you're in school. So that's where it came from. And no, it is not my official legal government name. That is a nickname.
So, okay, do you feel comfortable revealing to the world, to get a scoop here on Shane Plays, what you're?
Sure.
We can edit this out if you don't want. What is your given name?
Ernest Green.
Ernest Green.
Yeah, it sounds official. I'm even the third. If you can get your head wrapped around that, I seem official and aristocratic.
The third. Yeah, it would have been you and Lovey on Gilligan's Island.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
What's your favorite old sitcom like that? I love Gilligan's Island. I love some Beverly Hillbillies.
The
You gotta-
crazy thing is my wife just asked me this a couple of days ago.
Really?
And I mean, it was instant and without hesitation, and it took her off guard. My favorite sitcom was Fantasy Island.
You consider that a sitcom?
I mean, when I was that age, I didn't know the difference between any of the genres of TV, but yeah, that was always, and I mean, it makes sense because it's something somebody creates with their mind on this island, and it is so immersive that it becomes real.
It's actually, people probably look at it as cheese now, but it's actually a really good setup. You got the mysterious Mr. Rourke, who you never quite understand what's going on with Mr. Rourke, but he's mysterious and very likely magical.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's one of those classic tropes. It's like Needful Things.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
you want.
Yeah, we can make this deal, but it's not going to go the way you think it is. It's the monkey paw in a guy giving you what you want.
Right. Yeah, they always, of course, since it was back in the days when everything got wrapped up in either 30 minutes or an hour.
Right.
And everybody learned a moral. Right. My fantasy is to be a superhero, or my fantasy is to be a private eye, or whatever the fantasy was. But they always learned a moral about themselves. So,
oh yeah. And I mean, some of the ones I watched were like, oh, as I remember it from being a kid, it was this major, scary moment, and now it's probably totally stupid. I got to look them up online and see if I can find them.
It really was a good setup. I think, didn't they try to redo it?
Yes, they did for a while.
Yeah. So, but now that was what I liked when they did the crossover and the Love Boat went to war with Fantasy Island, and the Love Boat parked off of the island and was lobbing cannonballs into Mr. Rourke's. That was, I can't remember. I need to go watch that again. I can't remember who won, because Mr. Rourke started unleashing the fantasies on the Love Boat, and Steuben, he had to beat Picard and get him out of that. That was crazy.
I mean, Mr. Rourke is Khan. He's not going to take that.
There
will be revenge served cold.
Well, then he snuck Tattoo over.
Oh yeah,
it's crazy. So that needs to be a made for TV movie right there. Gilligan's Island versus Fantasy Island versus the Love Boat.
We could sell that. We could sell that to Netflix in a minute.
Yeah, let's do it. So anyway, all right. So you love some Fantasy Island. I don't know. I love a lot of sitcoms. I grew up on sitcoms. I love that format, but I mean, I love, Gilligan's Island, Beverly Hillbillies. And I'm talking more of like the 60s stuff, 70s. You got into all this other,
sure.
Three's Company.
For the freaky kids, you had the Munsters.
Yeah.
And, all that stuff too.
Well, I think Rob Zombie either is about to or just dropped his version of the Munsters.
Yep. It's in October.
Is it in
I'm
October?
Waiting for it.
I'm going to give it a chance. I'm on a Facebook group that's all about horror movies. And anything Rob Zombie, it's centered around Joe Bob Briggs, right? The Joe Bob Briggs collective or whatever. So, but even when Joe Bob is off season, it keeps going, the Facebook group. But if Rob Zombie does something, they will just savage it, and I'm like, just wait and see. Just wait and see.
I've been a Zombie fan for a long time, back to when I first heard him in White Zombie, and then he started making movies, and I was like, what is this craziness?
Yeah.
It took me a long time to see House of a Thousand Corpses, but that's on the regular rotation for Halloween movies.
And see, that's because that's my least favorite of those movies, like with that crazy family. Because you had House of the Thousand Corpses, and then you had the next one that was almost like
Devil's Rejects.
Devil's Rejects, and then you had the one after that,
Three from Hell.
Three from Hell.
You keep rattling these off, man.
I liked the second two more than because House of a Thousand Corpses, man. We're here to talk about your RPG stuff, but House of Thousand Corpses was basically Rob Zombie doing Chainsaw Massacre, basically.
Yeah.
Not quite, but basically. And
Well,
then
it was Texas Chainsaw Massacre with a heavier dose of Ed Gein. So, which is what Chainsaw was based on also. So, yeah, I mean,
that I was not aware of that. So,
yeah, well, I think all of those, hey, I'm going to pull your skin off and wear it as a suit. I think that all kind of came from Ed.
From him, yeah, old Ed. But anyway, yeah, the Three from Hell and Devil's Rejects are more like psychopaths doing Butch Cassidy and Sundance,
Right. Yep.
And with road trip movies thrown mixed in. And I don't know those. I mean, I like all three of them, but the second two, I don't know, grab me more than because I know a lot of people are all about House of a Thousand Corpses.
Well, that's and some of his other movies that people hated, I appreciate more than even that line. I mean, 31 is a creepy ass concept for a movie.
Yeah, which I have not seen that one yet. I've seen that, I know it's out there, but I haven't watched that one.
It's straight up nuts. It's a torture horror movie. So that it is definitely not for everyone. But the witch movie, I can't think of it.
I don't know. I think the only other movies I've seen by Zombie are his Halloween movies. Which I don't hate them. There's a lot going for him. My only critique of his Halloween movies, or I think Michael Myers works better when you don't know his motivation. When he's just evil because he's evil. Right. That's scarier to me than knowing why he's crazy.
Yeah. And that movie I couldn't think of was Lords of Salem.
Okay, yeah, I haven't seen that one. I've heard of it.
And I like that because the culty evil bad guys take people over through a record of all things. So yeah, it's
like backwards masking.
It has one on there, but this cult sends Sherry Zombie is the DJ, so she gets this record delivered to her and she starts playing it and it starts making her go crazy and it starts turning her into a witch, and then these other people do witchy stuff, and I liked it.
Yeah, a lot of people criticize Rob Zombie for always casting his wife. I don't really care about. I mean, that's fine with me. I thought she looked in Three from Hell when she's wearing that like a white dress and she's got the Indian chief's Native American headdress on and she's got the bow and arrow. That was so cool, man. I mean, that was just sweet imagery. So anyway, all right, let's move on. I want, as people could tell, Skeeter and I like movies. And in fact, before we even started recording, you were
I can actually tie this into our whole point for doing this. So this is not as off the track as it may seem to people.
Bring us a beautiful segue.
Yep. So The Valley Out of Time is a Kickstarter. It starts October 4th, goes through the 25th. It is an encapsulation of the old school dinosaur movies from like the 60s and 70s. Not Jurassic Park, because those movies are actually watchable. I mean, these whole stop motion and claymation dinosaur movies and the Ray Harryhausen movies, all of those things. That's what this series is trying to grasp, is that feel.
Which I love that. I love the old dinosaur movies.
I wanted the encounters and the images that Game Master is describing people to make them instantly think of a Frank Frazetta painting. I did The Valley Out of Time, and I wanted to do that as a 6-part series, mostly because I didn't have it all done at the beginning. And I wanted to make it so people coming in later could pick and choose what they wanted. it generally goes a book of encounters and then another book of supplementary material. So part 1 is Welcome to the Valley. That introduces you to the valley at a time and some of the crazy stuff. There's a giant lizard and a dinosaur and these kind of subhuman humanoids that are there that honestly came directly from Frank Frazetta oil paintings. So
which is cool.
I saw those and I said, I want to adventure with that. And then the next book, Exploring the Valley, gives you random encounters and tells you a little bit more about the behind the scenes part of it. And then I did part 3, which was more encounters. And then part 4 is the tribes and factions and economy and barter and history. And then part 5, that's going to be coming up for Kickstarter next week, that is the kind of the boss thing of the valley, which you can try to fight or not. And then part 6 is actually more encounters for higher level play. There's 4 encounters, and this is for, say, in Swords and Wizardry, this is for when you're 8th, 9th, 10th level. And I wanted to put that in there because there aren't a lot of things that challenge you all the time. So I wanted this to be oh, yeah, we shouldn't fight that. Let's run.
So, yeah, which is, I mean, that is a staple of that, you were talking about that, that genre of movie.
Yeah.
Like, they rarely, like, whoever it is that runs into the dinosaur is rarely going to fight it. They're like, I suggest we remove ourselves from this event, vicinity forthwith. It's like, let's go.
The movie posters for 1 million years BC, when these cavemen are using these wooden spears against a T-Rex, it's like that is literally an adventure in this series.
Yeah, which is cool. Yeah. So did you say the Kickstarter is for volumes 5 and 6? Let's talk about exactly what. Okay, so the Kickstarter is volumes 5 and 6 in this series.
It's part 5, Rotten at the Core, and part 6, Gods Walk the Valley.
And so, which systems are you focusing on? Because I've heard you've mentioned 5e, you've mentioned Swords and Wizardry, DCC, and MCC. Are you focusing mainly on DCC and MCC now, or what is your?
All of the books in this series are released with a DCC MCC mashup. The stats are very similar, so any of the monsters I give stats for that and Swords and Wizardry.
Okay.
So in the Kickstarter there is an option to get 4 books that is part 5 and 6 for both systems, or all 3 systems, but it's only 4 books.
All right, say that again. In the Kickstarter, people have an option to do what now?
So you can, part 5 is available in 2 different game systems, and part 6 is available in 2 different game systems. And there is an option for some of the people out there, and they've been following all the Kickstarters. You can get 4 books. You can get all the ones being released for that if you get both books in both systems. It's confusing, but it makes sense when you look at it.
Well, that's one thing I was going to ask, because I know it's more work. But do you find that I see this a lot, and I respect it, especially where smaller pubs will release their material for multiple game systems. Is that just to be cool to the players, or does that make the Kickstarters more financially viable, or both? Because I feel like it's just to be cool to the players when I see it.
It's a little bit of both. I mean, it definitely, if I was releasing for only one system, it would cut out. And my Kickstarters releasing this way have been pretty close to 50-50. It's a 50-50, 60-40 kind of split. One is not way more significant than the other.
Okay.
Certainly not enough for me to drop one of them.
Okay.
And it's kind of me thumbing my nose at some people in, some of the fans and some people in the business. There's often a commentary that one system is better than another one because you can't tell a story in a certain rule set, which I think is absolute garbage. I can run if a module is written well, you can put any mechanics to it and have a good time. I will stand up to anybody who disputes that and challenge them. I mean, I've done it. I've grabbed modules from other systems and run them at game conventions a bunch of times. So it's not as big of a deal as it seems, especially since the way I write is very cinematic and descriptive. I have a number of times been told I'm wordy. So, but that's what I want. I want, when you run an SGP adventure at the table, I want you to be able to visualize what the characters are doing. That's part of the point for me. So,
so you got some pros. You're not just you're not just a list of numbers. You got some pros.
Yeah, I can get a little prosy.
Yeah.
I was actually doing some editing today, and I had to go through and say, okay, stop with the quotation marks. You're being too informal.
Mm. Yeah.
And I joke around. I write RPG stuff like I think Deadpool would. Every once in a while I do this little aside to the reader, wink wink, nod nod. Because I want people to have fun. The people playing the scenario should be having fun, and the person reading it trying to get some. It's like, hey, let's be a little jokey about it. I don't want this to be a textbook.
I've said this before, but I'll repeat it. And I don't want every RPG book I read to be like this. But I will say, one of the funniest things I've ever read, and one of the best times I've ever had reading an RPG book. Have you ever read Whole Human Occupied Landfill from Black Dog Publishing? It was an imprint of White Wolf.
Sounds familiar, but
it was one of the. It was written very informally.
Yeah.
And it was one of the funniest things I've ever read in my life. But I'm like you, when I write, I like to inject, personality into it. So,
yeah, I want my game and my scenario that I give to somebody to be immersive.
Right.
I heard this from some quote, and for some reason I always think it came from Gene Simmons, but I have no idea. When people sit down at your table to play at a convention or they buy your book, they're spending their hard-earned money on something you are giving them. So you make damn sure it's the best you can do. Otherwise, you've robbed those people. And that is a philosophy that I have carried with me for a long time in RPGs. And I think that's the way it should be done.
Right. Yeah, and that's fair. I mean, you're basically saying that you want people to get their money's worth.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. And I mean, for sure, these zines that I'm putting out are only $10 a piece. So I hope you get more quality than you're actually spending.
So Skeeter Green Productions, where do you prefer people? Is Drive-Thru RPG? Where do you prefer people to, if they're not supporting your Kickstarter, which, what's the name of it again?
The Kickstarter is The Valley Out of Time for Swords and Wizardry DCC MCC Part 5 and 6 Final on Kickstarter.
The Valley Out of Time on
Valley
Kickstarter.
Out of Time.
That will be October 24th through October. No, October 4th.
October 4th through 25th.
Yeah, October 4th through 25th. So if it's not on Kickstarter, where do you want people to go to DriveThruRPG and look for Skeeter Green? Where do you prefer people to buy your stuff from?
You can get the PDFs of all of my books on DriveThruRPG, and all of my PDFs are $4, except for one Mork Borg book that I did that is a 200-page PDF. I think that's $15. But you can go to SkeeterGreenProductions.com. That's my website. You can also go to Goodman Games in their third-party publishers arena, and I believe Jim Wampler at MudPuppyGames.com also has my books.
Well,
so I'm all over the place.
Yeah. All right. So again, folks, that's Skeeter Green Productions. Main thing is, right, if you're listening to this podcast during the month of October, go check out the Kickstarter, the Valley Out of Time, volumes 5 and 6, the final, for multiple game systems. How soon after a Kickstarter does something become like just available in your general store? I mean, obviously after you fulfill it, I would assume. But
yeah, this one's going to take a little bit longer than normal because we're getting to the end of the year, and I didn't want to promise anybody, oh, I'm going to have this out for Christmas, and it not show up. So the plan is to fulfill in January. And if I can get them done before, I will certainly get them out to people as soon as they... I'll get them out to the Kickstarter backers as soon as they get here. I've been really good and very fortunate that I've been able to dodge the shipping issues. So, this one's supposed to ship in January, and sorry it's not going to be here by Christmas. But yeah, I don't want to make promises I can't keep.
I mean, that's fair enough. It's better to, there are people that get themselves into trouble with Kickstarter by not not counting the cost before they say what's going to happen.
Yeah, and it's really easy to have a cascade of delays.
Yeah,
and I mean, it happens to everybody.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, there's realities in business, like we've said. So. Anyway, so check out, like I said, if you're listening to this in the month of October, between the 4th and the 25th, go check out the Kickstarter. Go check out SkeeterGreenProductions.com. Check out DriveThruRPG. I think Frog God Games, Jim Wampler's website. You're everywhere.
I'm all over the place, man.
You are ubiquitous.
Oh my!
You are
the
ubiquitous.
U word.
Skeeter Green, ubiquitous. Yeah. So
I'm gonna get that on a T-shirt.
Ubiquitous. It's like an album cover.
Yeah,
it's like you and sort of half light and half shadow. This dramatic,
like a Tool cover or something.
Yeah, and then ubiquitous. Yeah, yep. I love it. So, all right, so let's back it up a second. So Skeeter has a RPG publishing company called Skeeter Green Productions.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit more about Skeeter Green Productions in general. How long have you been doing it?
Crikey. It's been, I lost time in the pandemic, so it's 4 or 5 years that I've had the company. Before that, I was a writer, editor, producer, content developer for Frog God Games for 10 years.
And so that's how you're like, Zach really well. Zach Glazar, I should say.
Yeah, I was sort of positioned as the person who took in pitches from people and started developing them and tried to do some editing and organize a bunch of stuff. Essentially what Zach does now, I was starting to do for the company then. And Zach loves to tell the story about how I didn't warn him about anything that he was stepping into, to which I agree.
Yeah.
I did not.
Well, that's the best way to learn, though, right?
Well,
but panic.
Yeah,
I'm joking.
He's done such a great job, and the whole Frog God company, they have just progressed in leaps and bounds, and I could not be happier and prouder of those guys and ladies and what they've accomplished. It's a big deal. I mean, Frog God Games came from Necromancer Games, who actually published the first thing of any kind for third edition. When third edition came out, they were right there. And there are, I think, over 100 titles for Necromancer Games and Frog God Games. And then I can look back and I find my name in a lot of those books for doing stuff. So yeah, my first paid RPG gig was in 2000. I submitted some spells for a book and I got paid like $5. And I was so excited.
Professional credit, baby.
Hey, yeah. That was, which is bad sometimes when I think about it, because if I had, applied myself, like they say in high school, then I would probably be further along. But I'm having fun.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I mean, people define success differently.
Yeah.
The more I go in my life and my career, I've got a couple of different careers actually. I have my full-time career and then I have my side career, which I think is more and more common these days.
Oh yeah, sure.
And
sure.
I've come to learn that for me, the definition is, am I accomplishing something that I feel good about, and am I enjoying myself? Right?
Yeah.
Because there's people out there making money, maybe hand over fist. I don't even know what a fist is. Hand over fist. They might be miserable.
I think that's a Lovecraftian tendril.
Yeah, a foot. Yeah, it is a Lovecraftian tendril. That's right.
Well, I'll tell you what. I'm gonna steal it and put it in a monster description. You can bet that.
You do it, baby. So yeah. If you're, I mean, I really think, and I have a lot of people on this show that are like you, that they're doing their own thing, they're making their own thing, they're out there, and I do think that it's important to point out that don't chase just being big, right?
Oh yeah, no.
Do what you enjoy, and if you get big, great, but if not, enjoy what you do. If you enjoy what you do on a daily basis, you're ahead of a lot of other people. In my opinion. Yeah.
I mean, and this is directly something that Zach and I talk about in the Small Publishers Seminar, is if you are a creative and you are looking at RPGs to be your break and make you famous, I have some disappointing news for you. There are probably more people who have gone to space than become super famous because of RPGs. Now, yeah, if you're a fantastic artist and you happen to, paint something that gets put on a book, that's not the same thing. But if you enjoy RPGs and love them, and I always use artists for an example because that's the easiest one for me to visualize doing this. If you want to draw art for people to use in the RPG world, you're going to need to have another job, because unless you are extremely fortunate, that is not a cost of living viable profession.
Right.
And, with the way the economy is going and how the pandemic changed so many things, some of that is still shaking out, and it may become more viable to do the gig career type stuff, but it's RPGs are not going to get you a 6-figure salary.
Yeah, and it's got to be very rare cases. I mean, you've got to be, probably the most shining example of somebody I can think that has come out of the industry and did their own thing and has become famous and successful would probably be Monty Cook. But even Monty Cook is only famous within the RPG world. You know what I mean? I mean,
He may extend a little bit just because he's also a rare case. I mean, he was fundamental in getting. I don't know if he worked on 4th edition, but 3rd and 5th edition, he was very important. He's a little bit different than a lot of other third-party publishers because he has his own systems as well. So, and that's just smart. If you are a creative, I've had this argument with a bunch of people, the difference between certain definitions like game designer, game developer, author, what do those roles actually mean? Because as soon as somebody writes 3 sentences on a piece of paper for a dungeon design and says, "Oh, I'm a game designer," it's like, no, you're not. You could be an author for sure. And that's no disparagement on anyone's skill, but unless you are fundamentally changing the, physics and game mechanics of a system, you're not a game designer.
Right. You're not designing. Right.
Right. Now, and also, like I mentioned before, when I worked at Frog God Games, I was a developer. So people are like, well, what does that mean? It's like, okay. So that means when a manuscript comes into a game company, whether they buy it or it's some kind of commission or whatever the contractual part is, the game developer takes that, looks at it, and says, how do I get it from point A of what you've given me to point Z where it's publishable and people will buy it?
See, to me, that sounds like an editor. So help me understand the difference there.
So an editor, so there are different types of editors. There's the standard, writing editor where people, you write something out and they say, well, you should say this over here and you should say this over here, make this more concise, expand on this idea a little bit more, and then it gets down to punctuation, formatting, that kind of stuff. Then there's a content editor, which is unique to games. So you take this story that somebody has given you, and it may have some game mechanics to it. Say it's written for 5th edition. So a content editor will take that and say, what changes do we need to do to release this for Swords and Wizardry or Dungeon Crawl Classics or, 5th edition 0.75 or whatever that's coming out. Content editors.
D&D 1.
Yeah. Content editors are the kind of mechanics. They go in there and start wrenching around and moving game mechanics like, is this ascending armor class or descending armor class? Stuff like that. So a developer is kind of like a producer in music. They tweak everything and massage it a little bit, and when they're done through some kind of magic, you can read this and go, oh, this looks like a module. This is crazy, because it came in as sheets of paper bullet pointed. And I say that as a very specific example because that's how I used to get some.
Well, I mean, so who was trying to make sure? So you've got a writer who wrote up an idea for a module,
Right.
and like a freelance, because a lot of people freelance. Most companies use freelancers. So
that is true.
You got a freelancer who puts an idea together for a module, pitches it, whatever. Skeeter Green Productions or Frog God or Necromancer or whoever, Goodman Games, Planet X Games, just to throw some names out there, buy it from the freelancer, but then a developer takes it across the finish line. Am I saying that right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
And the developer can also sometimes be the project manager. And the project manager is the person who organizes the content, the editors, the artists, the scheduling, the printing, media information. So a lot of these things are different roles that one or two people fulfill. And if it's a big project, it can be extremely overwhelming. And I say that as somebody who worked on Rappaneathic, Bard's Gate, The Blight, and several other very large books from Frog God Games.
Well, that was one of the things that I took away from your small publisher seminar that you and Zach do. Which, like, again, hopefully we can either get one of those recorded at a con, or else I'll have you and Zach on, and we'll do it on a podcast if you guys want. But one of the things I took away was that the industry, people think of like, oh, I want to get into writing RPGs or creating RPGs, and they have an idea of what that looks like. But really, the industry looks quite different from different angles. So if I'm a freelancer who's, and I've done a little bit of that. I worked on Level Up Advanced 5th Edition for Ian Publishing. And they were like, okay, they basically hired a team and they knew what they were going to be doing. And then they doled assignments out. So I didn't pitch them anything. I worked on monsters. I worked on spells. I worked on magic items, stuff like that. But I was a freelancer. So from my perspective, I was writing RPG content. There was a guy named Mike Myler who was heading up the project that from his perspective, he probably felt more like Perry White at the Daily Planet.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
He's dealing with all kinds of, we got this deadline. I got this person doing that. Oh, I need to hire another freelancer for this. And I need to make sure these people get paid. So at a certain level, being in the RPG industry can almost be like you're an office manager and you're abstracted from some of the cool creative stuff that's going on.
Oh, 1,000%. And that is, again, we have mentioned this in the small publisher seminar. That is a point on the path. Pretty much every small publisher will get to that point. Unless you totally flame out your first product and decide not to ever do it again.
Yeah, you say, I'm done with this. Yeah, it's work. I mean, there's no shortcuts to success. I mean,
no.
That's one thing I've learned because I've chased, even doing, I've done talk radio, which I always wanted to do. So I've done several years of talk radio. I've done podcasting. I've done writing. I've been working on my personal art for a few years now.
Yeah, I saw some of your sketches in the Discord. Those look great. We should talk.
Oh, well, okay. Yeah, Ed Bickford actually saw some of my stuff.
Oh, he needs to shut up.
Well, no, he was complimenting me.
No, I'm tight with Ed. I give him so much crap. We actually Levi Combs from Planet X Games,
Sure,
my
yeah.
brother in the Independent Publishers Union.
Who only podcasts shirtless, evidently.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
a savage barbarian. Which there's a joke about that I'll get to because it involves Ed as well.
Well,
he was Levi was putting out his zine series, the Phylactery,
right.
and he started using Ed for some of the art. And just like whenever you have any friends, when you're a single person studio, you're always like, "Hey, man, who'd you use for this art, or who's available for this art?" And he gave me Ed's name, and I got him to do a bunch of stuff for me. And we finally got him to start coming to RPG conventions because he would always go to comic conventions. And he had no idea what was going on at the convention. So it was wonderful. We mess with him all the time. He is such a sweetheart and such an amazing artist. He's actually kind of dipped back into comics and doing some comic covers for some other people. So I can't get him to do as much work, but yeah,
I like Ed a lot.
He is gold.
Yeah, I've had him on the show, and he's talking about how he worked really hard to get into comics for a long time, and he shared with me since then, ironically, by doing more RPG art, that opened comics up for him more.
Oh yeah, I bet.
Yeah, he said it's almost like when some actors they'll go to France, and then their work in France opens them work up back in America or something. I think that was kind of the analogy that he used.
Well, I think there's gotten to be, it's either gone back to the 70s and 80s, or it's just become like the 70s and 80s, where hobbyists of different kind of things, like the people who like to nerd out to comic books and sci-fi movies and horror films and all of this stuff, are cross-pollinating and finding these other things that they also like. I mean, Joe Manganiello loves D&D. And he is not a poser about it. He is not.
No, he's legit. He's legit.
Because, I mean,
well, he's like on a personal crusade to make the Dragonlance movies.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah, like he wants to really bad.
He's going to be fantastic in any role that he's in because he's hilarious. I just think he's funny as shit in any movie he's in, where he's supposed to be. So, I like it.
Yeah, no, he's legit. Yeah, did you talk about the art? Most of the stuff that you've seen of mine is like, I use a reference, but did you see the Legends of Log piece that I just did?
Was it on? I was just scrolling through it today. Was it
look
on
in
the Discord.
Click up in the comics channel. It looks like an Ent crossed with Conan.
Oh, holy cow!
Yeah, that's one of my favorite indie comics right now. It's called Legends of Log. So I just did that yesterday.
Yeah, one of the encounters in my part 6 of my Kickstarter that I just finished up a couple of days ago is a bunch of palm tree ents that come and try to kill you.
Well, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Reminds me of something that Jim Wampler ran us through in his Mutant Crawl Classics. Texas. Anyway, all right, I want to take it back over to. Love to talk to you about some art. I'm still, I've been working on my art for about 3 years now. I will say I always let people know most of the stuff that I do that looks really good, I'm working from a reference. So,
Sure.
Yeah. So anyway, okay. Which I've learned that more artists do that than I realized. I thought all these artists just whip stuff out, out of thin air. I want to talk a little bit more about Skeeter Green Productions. Do you do it full time?
No.
Yeah,
no.
That's another thing that we need to let people know.
I've got a cushy day job.
Yeah.
So that pays quite a bit, and I have my lovely wife who also has a job. So I don't have to do the hustle
Right.
that a lot of people do. And, much respect to anybody who decides they want to do RPGs full time. If you can do it and that makes you happy, you won, just
Right.
like anything else. One of the things that we talk about in the seminars is the difference between a small publisher and a freelancer. So a freelancer does their portion of a book, whether it's an author, artist, editor, what have you, and then they're done. They get paid for their time and their effort. Not awesome because this is RPGs.
Right.
But then they're generally out of the project. An independent, or not an independent, a small publisher owns the whole process. So, if you're doing any of the creative on it, say you're an artist and you hire somebody to be an author, you have to do all the stuff. It's like a general contractor.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you are in charge of schedule, budget, all of this stuff. You can't squeeze somebody that's doing work for you necessarily. We've been very fortunate when we go to Gamehole Con that Crystal Mazer has been coming on our small publisher seminars, and she is a top shelf freelancer. So we get to have her perspective on what she has to deal with, and we try to help other small publishers to be able to communicate with freelancers, because if you don't know their language, you're cutting your own foot off for your project.
Right. So can you do you have an example of that?
Yeah. Layout is a perfect one. When you get your book written and you have some art gathered and you hand all of these pieces off to a graphic designer who's going to lay your book out, and they hit you with, what do you want for a bleed? A lot of people...
I don't want to bleed. What are you doing?
Yeah. Exactly. It's like, I'm not bleeding. What are you talking about? And bleed refers to the space beyond the pages where the image goes out, and, that's like the cutting point. So you don't want certain aspects of your art to be near the bleed line because you don't want the page to cut it off. Well, I don't know anything about that. So if somebody asks me, hey, what are the specs you need? I have to go ask somebody else that I trust and who knows what I am all about and what I am trying to do, and say, I don't know what this means. What do I say? So that's the thing. The more that you know about how somebody does their job, when they ask you a question, you can give them the answers to make it go faster, smoother, and you're not wasting your or their time.
Gotcha. Okay. So in other words, you need to know the lingo and the jargon of the type of freelancer you're working with.
Absolutely.
Gotcha. Yeah, even in one thing I ran into years ago, I used to do a lot of website development and thereby graphic design as well. And one thing you run into almost immediately is I would design stuff for the web, and then the client would be like, "Oh, can you also send me this in CMYK because I need to send it to a printer?" And I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So it was a failure on both sides, right? I didn't know enough at that point to know about C, because web coloring is, at least, especially back in the day, it's gotten more sophisticated, mainly because of Apple pushing display resolution and beauty, and their iPhone and all that. But definitely back in the day, you could get away with a much smaller color palette and resolution.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But so when the client was asking me for stuff, they didn't specify I need web and print quality. And I wasn't experienced enough to know to even ask. Right. So,
Right.
so that, it's just kind of a learning process. So,
Yeah, that does get into a sticky wicket.
oh yeah, big time. Cause I'm like, I've got a client who was desperately happy with something I did for them. And then a week later, they're unhappy with me because I'm like,
Right.
I don't have it in that level, so that would have to be recreated. And all of that stuff that Skeeter's throwing out, folks, is a wonderful teaser of his small. I would pay to go in his and Zach's small publisher seminar because they're giving you for free hard-won advice if you're wanting to either be a publisher or a freelancer. They cover both sides, what you need to know. One of the things they lead out the gate with is don't work for free.
Oh yeah,
I don't care how new you are. Don't work for free. Your time is valuable.
If you don't value your time, somebody else is absolutely not going to do it.
Yeah, and
there are very few altruistic business people,
right?
And while it has been my experience that the third-party publishing RPG community is generally pretty cool. I have never had anybody kind of shut me down if I've asked anybody a question. There are some very specific and notable exceptions to that, which I'm not going to be catty and bring up, but
yeah. I'll bring one up. I brought this up in the seminar. I'll bring it up again. I'll take the heat for this one. The guy that did kickstarted a new version of Big Eyes Small Mouth when he hadn't even paid the people from the previous version.
Oh yeah.
So watch out for that stuff.
He
found evidently some technical loophole, but there was nothing cool about what he did.
And there are always going to be people like that. I mean, we had the Ken Whitmans from before. There's a huge difference with RPG Kickstarters. I'll just focus on that for a minute. There's a huge difference between people who screw up a project, learn from it, and grow from it, and people who thought, oh, here's a way where I can make some money, and just don't produce things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, there are a few people out there taking advantage of the system, but most people are earnestly trying to genuinely, in good faith. And Kickstarter, we talked a little bit about this before we started recording. People forget, because especially for like comic books and role-playing game stuff and like maybe board games, it's Kickstarter is being leveraged and used as a pre-order system. But at its core, Kickstarter is hey, speculate with me and let's see if we can make this product happen.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing where things change from their idealization into how they're actually able to be used and used most commonly.
Right. And I mean, you've even got larger companies or other situations where financially the person or the company does not need to use Kickstarter, but it's a good marketing tool.
That is, I would say the only companies that are not going to use Kickstarter are probably WotC and probably Paizo when Pathfinder was really doing well. I haven't followed it, so I don't know if it's doing well. But mid-tier publishers, I mean, Frog God Games, Kobold Press, freaking Chaosium. all of those companies use Kickstarter for at least certain products because even at their, they seem so giant to little one-person shops like me. The margins in RPGs, unless you are in distribution and on a national at minimum, if not global scale, you can't take the risk because if you buy 2,000 copies of a title and then you find out only 30 people like your idea, you're done.
Right.
And that is for anybody.
Well, and that's the thing, like a lot of people think, oh, like you mentioned, like Chaosium or even Paizo or something like that. In the great scheme of things, not only in the entertainment sphere, as entertainment as a business sphere in general, but even within game publishing, RPGs are very small. Like the people who are in the hobby think of it as big because it's such a big part of our life. Yeah. But as far as a wedge of the pie, a slice of the pie compared to the big thing, it's very tiny. So that's why you see larger companies using Kickstarter, what we think of as larger, relatively larger.
And there are, board game companies use it because to produce a board game is a lot of money.
Yeah.
So they have to know that they're going to at least get their money back. CMON is on Kickstarter all the time with different stuff, and they're pulling in $1 million, $2 million Kickstarters. But what people go, oh my God, they're making so much money. Yeah, I bet they're not.
Their profit margin. That's something I've talked about a lot. That revenue versus profit are way two different things.
For third-party publishers, small publishers in RPGs, the margins are tiny, and there are so many things that people don't see. Like if somebody produces a book and they bring in, we'll say $30,000, some people are going to look at that and say, hey, that's my salary for the year, or that's half my salary for the year, and you made it in 3 weeks.
Yeah, but what are the printing and distribution costs?
And then you get 10% taken off just off the top.
Right, Kickstarter takes that
goes to their chunk.
Yep.
You have likely if you've made this much, you have a hardback book, and those prices to get printed domestically are enormous. Plus all the delays, you're not making that ridiculous of a margin. And God forbid, if you forget that that's income that you have to pay tax on, the bulk of that, you're screwed.
Yeah, and that's what, man, every time I have somebody on the show that is a creative that's in business for themselves in some fashion, I always try to highlight this stuff because you got to go in with your eyes open. Mm-hmm. And I'm not trying to rain on anybody's parade. I'm not trying to be a party pooper, but you want to go in with your eyes open. You can still chase your dreams.
Absolutely.
You can have a great time doing it, but there's a reality side to it. Even if you're a freelancer that just works, like let's say that let's say that once a month I do a 1,000 words freelancing. I've still got to keep up with. I got deadlines. I've got to get it in. The publisher may ask for revisions. I've got to invoice for that. I've got to track that income. I got to do taxes on it. So that's just. And then, am I going to be an LLC, or am I just going to do a Schedule C, or am I just going to say that's self-employment? And that's just doing 1,000 words a month.
Yeah.
So the point is there's realities. And if you want to be a publisher, you're going to be doing a lot of your own creative, and you're hiring people and having to keep up with all that. But anyway, all right. So I definitely want to have you and Zach on for to do a full on, because we barely scratched the surface of.
Well, just to jump back a little bit, when you were saying about all the things that people don't know and that hard-won knowledge of being in the trenches, that was the impetus for Zach and I to start our YouTube show. So we would just get on and do reviews of products. Zach has a bajillion different RPGs. He's a very prolific collector. So he would just find stuff and then we would talk about it. And then we started to realize that we actually had developed a knowledge base. We were informed and know things about, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. We're behind the curtain.
Right.
And he and I started talking that, we should start telling people some of this stuff so it's not so difficult for the newer people that we're trying to hire. They don't know. Well, let's start giving this information. So we started doing it on the YouTube channel. And then I don't know if it was him or me, decided to do it as a seminar. And we did our first one at North Texas several years ago. And we've done it there, at GaryCon, and at Gamehole every year since then.
That's great. Yeah, it's good stuff. I mean, I thought it was great. One last thing I want to ask you, sort of involved with your publishing stuff. You have this, I saw it at North Texas. You guys had a booth set up. It's almost like a group of 4 publishers kind of advertising together, or I know it's you, Planet X. Is it the guy who does Hyperborea and then Bulette? Yeah. So tell us about that.
It's 5 different publishers. Okay. It's the Independent Publishers Union. It's Northwind Adventures, Jeff Talanian, who does the Hyperborea stuff. Me, Levi Combs with Planet X Games. He does all of the phylacteries and all the crazy zines. He's a producing machine. Silver Boulet is our buddies Ian McGarty and Rocky Gardner, and Jim Wampler of Mud Puppy Games. And we were all kind of talking about it. This actually came up because I got offered a special guest position at North Texas. And with the special guest benefits, you can get a free vending table to put your product out there so people can see what stuff you have, and you can, hawk your wares and all that stuff. And at the time, I had 3 versions of one book. I'm like, man, this is stupid. I should just give it up. And then I thought, well, it's free. Why don't I have some of my buddies put stuff on the table and actually do this? And it just grew from there. And now we're all over the place. Vending and going to conventions. And I mean, we have backdrops and fancy stuff. It's almost like we're taking this seriously.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was very eye-catching, and you guys had a good placement in North Texas. And another thing that was smart, you always had somebody there. Looked like I'm guessing, I'm assuming that you worked it out among yourselves. Like, let's always have somebody sitting at the booth. So,
for sure, you got to do that. We're actually getting set up for that and doing some communication for Gamehole that is in about just less than a month.
Yeah, it's always isn't it always over Halloween weekend, I think?
They're going to move it up, but it was always at the end of October because Madison, Wisconsin, where it's at, they have their football team. Just when they have games on the weekend, it has to be Gamehole has to be on an alternate weekend, otherwise it's just chaos down there.
Gotcha.
So,
Okay.
but yeah, they've nailed down the dates for it.
Yeah, I hear nothing but good stuff about Gamehole. So,
If people have never been to Gamehole, I encourage everyone to go. It is a wonderful experience. If it is the first time you've ever gone to a game convention, it will ruin you.
Yeah.
Because it is the smoothest running convention I have ever gone to, and I've gone to a bunch.
Yeah,
So,
I've heard that a lot. Alex Cameron and his crew that run it get a lot of good word of mouth on it. So.
Alex, Josh, Sean, Royce, and I know I'm forgetting some other people. Those guys have built an infrastructure for gaming that is just second to none. And it's just a bunch of guys. They all play D&D together.
The Gamehole was where they hung out and played. I've had Alex on a couple of times talking about it. There's actually a place called the Gamehole. I think it's above a bar, if I remember right.
Yeah. So Alex owns this pub, and the second floor of the pub is where they play D&D and where Alex's shrink-wrapped collection resides. I've been there a couple of times, and I mean, the artifacts he has in that room is amazing.
So Independent Publishers Union gave a shout out to all those guys. What's the name of all the different people involved again?
Northwind Adventures, Skeeter Green Productions, Planet X Games, Silver Bulette, and Mud Puppy Games.
Okay.
And if you look at a bunch of Mud Puppy Games puts out the Scientific Barbarian zine, which is amazing. But you're going to see all of our individual names writing articles for that. Ian from Silver Bulette does maps for me. Rocky from Silver Bulette does layout for a bunch of people. Levi writes all over the place. I've written a bunch for different companies. So
I always thought it was Bulette. Is it Bulette? Because it's named after the D&D monster, right? That looks like a Yeah, it's like a bullet. Yeah.
I strongly encourage you to ask Tim Kask that question.
No. Are you trying to get me in trouble?
It is Bulette, and at North Texas, I've yelled to people down the hallway that have been near Tim Kask and said, "Ask Matt pronounced Bulette." and Tim. Oh God, he is the gruffest person in person, but honestly, just absolute sweetheart. I think he's just gruff with us because he can be, because we're not going to go anywhere.
Well, I mean, he's an old grognard.
He's
the very definition of a grognard, man. He
is the captain of the old guard of D&D. I mean, he is the closest person to the source code that has been around consistently, except for Luke Gygax.
You've given some wonderful information about, running a company and being a freelancer and all that. But I also want to make sure to talk about your stuff. So, what does Skeeter Green Productions specialize in? What is your what sweet spot do you hit in the RPG industry? What do you produce?
One of my favorite modules was Expedition to the Barrier Peaks, because it mixed sci-fi and fantasy. And I have always loved that, because movies that I've enjoyed, The Time Machine. So you use science to go literally underground with these Morlock creatures and try to survive. That is so D&D and sci-fi. I totally get that some people are not interested in mixing the genres, and respect. Do play this game the way you want to. But I always try with what I write to sneak something in, or not even sneak it, have it very obvious that this is a mixture, but not done in like a ham-handed way. I mean, make it work. The first book that I wrote, Crypt of the Science Wizard, was an homage to Tomb of Horrors, but it has mechanical and technology elements to it.
So was the science wizard, was he like a mad scientist, or?
No one knows at this time. Yeah, I haven't put him in anything yet. I haven't put it. I shouldn't say him or her.
You haven't put
it isn't it.
You haven't put the entity that is the science wizard into. So it's
Correct.
just the crypt. I'll tell you one thing. I do like that bonkers mix. I mean, I love a good, just fantasy romp.
Right.
But I do. Barrier Peaks has always grabbed me in a cool way, and I'll tell you why. I like the mix of sci-fi and fantasy. I like settings they seem fantasy, but they're really far in the future, like Jack Vance, or even a lot of people. Shannara, the Shannara trilogy is in the future after a nuclear war. So every now and then, like a robotic thing will bust out. But what I liked about the Barrier Peaks, the Expedition of the Barrier Peaks, is it starts like a regular fantasy adventure. And then if you don't already have foreknowledge of the module, you get this wonderful surprise that, this is a spaceship and there's robots. Right?
Right.
So you start in quote unquote generic D&D world.
Uh-huh.
But then there's this, so you don't start in this world building that's a mix, but then you have this wonderful intrusion of futuristic technology. So instead of I'm going down to the dungeon, I'm going into a spaceship. So that was such a wonderful. I hate to sound all professory, but what is it? Dichotomy, juxtaposition.
Yeah, I think it's juxtaposition.
Yeah, the juxtaposition of it was great energy.
Well, yeah, one of the things that I have, I have a side box in Crypt of the Science Wizard for Dungeon Crawl Classics and Mutant Crawl Classics, where quote unquote magic is referred to as ultra science.
Right.
Because that quote, and I always forget who it is, if it's Arthur Clarke.
Any technology significantly advanced is that's Clarke.
Is indistinguishable from magic. And I thought, exactly. So if I have, a teleporter from Star Trek, or if I have a candle around a pentagram on the floor, it's a transporter. Doesn't matter how it works.
The practical effect is the same. Right.
And a lot of people get really hung up on that. And because I'm in the position where my books I am not relying on my books to feed my family or pay bills or anything. I'm doing this because I want to see this product out there. I can take some chances. I took a chance on a Kickstarter a couple of months ago, and it did not go as well as I thought it would. But I want to create these things, and when I have an idea for it, I'm gonna do it, and I'm not gonna let people tell me I can't.
Well, that's one of the nice things about being able to do something as a side, endeavor when you have freedom, right? Because you like you said, you've got your bases covered with your main gig and your wife. So you can experiment, you can play, and you can chase what you want to do. So you did Crypt of the Science Wizard. What other kind of products has Skeeter Green Productions done to give people an idea of what they can get from you?
So I did Crypt of the Science Wizard, and because I originally did it for 5th edition and Swords and Wizardry. And the 5th edition and Swords and Wizardry books had the detached cover, so it was like the old school modules. And it has a little art booklet with it, like Tomb of Horror and Barrier Peaks, so you can flip through and look at these specific pictures. And I just wanted to capture that old feel. And later, I revised it for Dungeon Crawl Classics and Mutant Crawl Classics. So there were some monsters in there that needed definitions, and I thought, well, maybe I should make a monster book. So then I made a monster book, the Crypto Codex, and it is for Dungeon Crawl Classic and Mutant Crawl Classics of some of the monsters that I've used and some that feature prominently outside the area where the Crypt of the Science Wizard is. So this is all stuff that's this book is a supplement to that. And then after that, I did the Valley Out of Time. I started with that.
All right. Well, any final thoughts there, Skeeter?
Support small publishers. They really need your help, and we're living in a golden age of zines. A lot of people are putting out a lot of great content, so give it a shot. If it's not me, take a look at somebody else.
Right. Yeah, do check. There is a lot of really cool stuff going on out there.
Yeah.
So, yeah. All right. Well, I've got to do this to you. It is either the highly anticipated or the highly dreaded bad joke of the week. So I always end my show with a bad joke. So here we go. Are you ready?
Hit me.
All right. And this is sort of an honor. There's some NASA probe that's supposed to hit an asteroid today. Did you see that?
I did not.
Now, this is not the joke. This is like real news. Yeah, it's there's like
you just said probe and asteroid. And you expect me to believe that is not the joke?
It's true. It's a small.
I'm not new.
Yeah, no, this is serious. Yeah, well, no, we're not talking about stuff clinging on Uranus. Hold on a second.
Okay, so probe the asteroid.
No, it's true. Hold on a second.
I believe none of this.
No, it's true. Hold on.
I'm being held against my will.
No, they're doing. Here it goes. They're doing it. They're doing live coverage. Okay, this is from ScienceAlert.com. Watch a live
official.
feed. No, it's true. You can go to YouTube right now. NASA has a live feed.
Yeah, believe everything on YouTube.
NASA's DART mission, and DART stands for Double Asteroid Redirection Test, will be the first to deliberately and measurably change the motion of a significant body in our solar system. In other words, it will smash into an asteroid. This is happening right now. You can go to YouTube. NASA's this thing literally, I'm not lying. So there's it looks like Voyager. It looks like Voyager or something, right?
Uh-huh.
And it's I'm serious. It's zooming towards an asteroid. And it launched a little spaceship out of it that has cameras in it to cover what's happening. So it launched this little piggyback spaceship that's flying along with it. And they're going to
probe is taking a selfie.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's as it probes the asteroid, it's taking a selfie.
Hey-o.
But it's true. So anyway, so they're going to smash it into this asteroid and try to change the direction of the asteroid to test for in the future when they're like, oh, there's a giant asteroid and it's going to kill us all. They'll learn what they need to do to redirect these asteroids. This is all true. Okay, now it's time for the bad joke.
Okay.
All right. This bad joke is in honor of probing the asteroid. All right. Astronomers. See, now this is all anticlimactic with the bad joke now. All right. Astronomers got tired of watching the moon go around the Earth for 24 hours, so they decided to call it a day.
Oh my God. We were doing better with the probing asteroid.
Well, the key is that it's the bad joke of the week.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be bad.
Well done.
So there you go. There you go. Yeah. And so there you go. So probing asteroids and calling it a day. That's how we'll finish this episode of Shane Plays Geek Talk. Well, Skeeter, I've enjoyed it. Look forward to talking to you again. Hopefully run into you at North Texas. And I would like to have you and Zach on and do a small publisher seminar. And then we can disseminate it.
Ooh.
We can further your ubiquity.
Excellent. One day I will be everywhere.
You will be everywhere, and you will be all things, just like the science wizard.
I will be all encompassing.
Yes, all encompassing.
I think that's how cult leaders start.
Yeah, it is.
Is that kind of the conversation that they have?
Yeah, but there's usually acoustic guitars and women. All right, well, I'm gonna wrap us up. Thanks so much for being on. Really appreciate it. And
thank you.
Yeah, no, it's been great. And everybody else, we will catch you next time on Shane Plays Geek Talk. Thanks so much for listening to Shane Plays Geek Talk. I certainly hope you enjoyed this journey into the things we love. For your convenience, show notes with helpful links for each episode can always be found at shaneplays.com. You can catch the podcast in several places, including on the blog at shaneplays.com, iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, Podbean, Amazon Music, Verbal, YouTube, and more. If you like what you hear and would like to support Shane Plays Geek Talk, you can do so for as little as $1 per episode on Patreon at patreon.com/ShanePlays. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time. Stay geeky, my friends.